I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics. Vice President Harris, is she getting the last laugh? Welcome to Perino on Politics, where I call my smart friends and find out what's on their minds about the state of American politics. And joining me back on the podcast today with a look at the dramatically reshaping of the presidential race is my friend Josh Kraushaar. He's a Fox News radio political analyst and editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. So we have three segments for you. I usually do a lot of prep, but yesterday morning at 7:30 on the flight from Milwaukee back to here, I said to the team, let's just wait until tomorrow morning to prep, because who knows where we will be in terms of the news cycle, because the last 8 days had been so crazy. And Josh, here we are with a dramatically changed race, and so much has changed. And so let's just get your take on how crazy the situation is. And I'll stop saying crazy, and we'll get you guys some good information so that you can start your week with what you need to know.
Well, what a month, Dana. I mean, it feels like the month has taken a year to transpire, starting with the debate that reshaped the presidential race.
Yeah, the debate was 3.5 weeks ago.
3.5 weeks ago. The assassination attempt, which feels, again, like wasn't just a little over a week ago, but that almost seems to have faded in our political memory. And now we have a new nominee for the Democrats, or at least a very likely new nominee, in Vice President Kamala Harris. Look, I think it's funny, in our politics, we've never seen such seismic shifts in such a short period of time. At the same time, Dana, I think the fundamentals of this race haven't changed a whole lot. I mean, you still have...
Why is that?
Well, you still have Harris, who's going to inherit the Biden record. And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, that Biden's age was a big problem, but it was also the voter perception of the economy, voter perception of the Biden administration's handling of immigration, of crime, a lot of the major issues that voters care about. So Harris is going to inherit those same vulnerabilities, even if she's able to campaign a little more effectively, even if she's maybe able to offer a stronger message on abortion that I think is going to be her calling card in this campaign. So look, before Biden's debate, he was down in every poll, almost every poll. He was down by a couple points to former President Trump. So I think even if Harris gets a good bounce, has a good week, reintroducing herself to voters, I still think Democrats start at this race at a disadvantage and have a little catching up to do.
Okay, so a few things. Let's talk about Biden for a moment. So I have a few things I want to ask you about Biden. So one of them is, what do you think the real story is as we start to piece it together about when he actually made a decision or came to the realization that it was over?
So the reporting has suggested that he has a very tight inner circle. In fact, a lot of his close staff, including his campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dillon, didn't really know about this decision until, really minutes, maybe an hour before it went out to the public. Look, I think Biden was trying to push this off as long as possible. I mean, I think he didn't see the political reality closing in on him. You can't win. I think even someone as stubborn as Joe Biden is, when you have your party's leaders, when you have rank and file members, when you have swing state senators saying you need to step aside, you just can't win the race. They basically, Democrats basically shot at their own captain, and they made him. Made him, even if he had a chance, it made it untenable for him to win the election, to even run for the election. So, I think he kind of came to the reality that no one wanted him to be the nominee, and there was a chance to have a graceful exit, and there was a chance to make this really ugly. And he took option number one. But look, the degree of civil war, of internal division within the party, the messiness to get from point A to point B, I think that'll leave some scar. Even though everyone seems to be rallying around Vice President Harris, there are scars that are going to be left as part of this transition, and I think it's still going to be a challenge for Democrats going into November.
But what about the fact that we do have reporting that Biden did not initially think that he would endorse Harris? What was that? I mean, do you know anything about that?
Well, I think it's inevitable. When you publicly pick a vice president saying you're ready to fill in for the job. If he didn't endorse Vice President Harris, it would almost undermine everything he said about her and about the whole selection process going back to 2020. So I think he had to get to that point. I've always thought that the inevitable backup plan for Democrats was Vice President Harris. The issue of race and gender runs so deeply in Democratic circles. The notion that you would push aside the first African American woman to run to be vice president and to possibly be the next president. I just did not see that would cause so much division within the party. It would create worse divisions along very, very racial and gender lines that I think was
and I
never
mean,
going to be
people in the Democratic Party fell pretty quickly early in the day. So Biden announces at 1:45 p.m. on Sunday he's out. And a couple of hours later, I was on air, and there was a tweet from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying, they better not think that they're just going to appoint somebody. You know, we need to have a process, and we're mad, and blah, blah, blah. 4 hours later, she folded, and she is on the Kamala train. So there must have been some strong arming, because then you had all of these cabinet officials, governors who might not think she's the best, but they perhaps are realizing that this is the only logical way for them to go. And I have a good friend who works for a major Democratic strategist, and I asked him about it. He's around, I would say, 40, 45 years old. And he said, I feel that if she is not the nominee, it will fracture the Democrats for a generation. That was just his opinion. So perhaps that is the case. And now she does not have a good approval rating with the American people. She was down around where Biden was. I mean, Trump has an actual higher approval rating than she does. But she, I guess, will have a chance to reintroduce herself.
Well, look, I kind of, to make a sports analogy, Joe Biden is like a quarterback who was almost ready to retire. He was injured. He couldn't throw long passes. If he was going to be the nominee, it would be all about the defense, about protecting the quarterback. But the quarterback couldn't win the game for the Democrats. It would have to be if he was ever to run, it was going to be through the surrogates and through his allies. With Harris, it's like getting a new quarterback who just got drafted, who can throw a long pass, who can run the ball a little bit, fleet on her feet, but she throws a lot of interceptions. She fumbles the ball a lot. A lot of times, if you're a football fan, you always want the backup quarterback to play, and then you realize they're not that good. Mm-hmm. And I think we're kind of in that moment for the Democrats where, look, Harris is younger. She can, I think, she'll run a vibrant campaign. It's a fresh start for the Democratic Party, but she also has a long record, Dana. We know her long record. We've covered her campaigns. She's consistently underperformed, both in the national stage and even in California. So look, I think she's going to have a new team around her. Maybe she'll have another chance to have a new start. But I think past performance is indicative of future results, and her past performance, both in office and on the political stage, has been pretty poor and left a lot to be desired.
And it's not like she gets a clean slate on the policies. I mean, if people are upset about inflation and the economy and immigration and crime, I mean, she's part of that White House.
She inherits all the baggage that the Biden White House has on the table. And look, I it's pretty clear she's sort of run and kind of positioned herself a notch to the left of Biden. And maybe that excites the progressives. Maybe that excites, younger voters. But it also comes at a cost. I think her progressive brand could cost her with sort of the moderate white voters in the Midwest that are so important to win states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, and where frankly Joe Biden was sort of overperforming in the race before he dropped out. So look, I think there's a lot. Look, I don't think it should be any surprise that Kamala Harris has been viewed very skeptically within Democratic circles about her ability to kind of perform politically. And we'll see now. She's now on the biggest national stage. She's going to be thrown into the fire. And I think Democrats are relieved that they've been able to hand the ball over to Harris and had a seamless process in that regard. But within a few weeks, she's going to have to perform, and she's going to have to, be adept and nimble on the issues.
My last question for this particular segment on this is let's say you're a Democrat and you are a glass half full kind of person, right? And so what are the positives on the Democratic side right now? It looks like their fundraising could improve. Enthusiasm might improve. And also, does she have the same electoral map path as Joe Biden?
So the biggest assets that Harris brings to the table, she's younger, obviously. She can she's actually pretty good at giving a stump speech, whereas Biden never really, in his old age, really could drive home a message effectively. She is a good fundraiser. She excites the base in a way that Joe Biden never could. And if you look at the numbers that we went over for many, many months about Joe Biden's weaknesses with African Americans, with younger voters, with progressives, she's going to boost that base number to the point where, I think this race is going to be close to tied when she starts campaigning and when the convention is over in August. I mean, Democrats were suffering from just base demoralization under Biden. They just couldn't get excited about their guy. So she's going to amp up some of that base excitement and enthusiasm and get those numbers up to a little more at a normal level that you would expect for a Democrat. About the map, Dana, I think in a way, I think she's a harder sell in those older, whiter states in the Midwest, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I think that unless she picks a running mate that's from one of those states, it's going to be a tough slog for Democrats to hold on to those three states. And they were already losing. A new poll came out testing Biden versus Trump in Michigan, Dana, yesterday, and down by 7 points. Yeah. Biden was. That's a lot. That's a lot of ground to make up. I think she may put Georgia, Arizona, maybe North Carolina, especially if she picks Roy Cooper, the governor there. Those three states in the Sun Belt may start to get a little more competitive, maybe because of the African American vote.
And a friend of mine sent me a note saying that she will try for Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, because she does think that those blue wall states up north are not for her. But then I talked to a good friend who does politics in Georgia, and he was like, but Trump's up by 5 already here, so he doesn't really see how that works. Okay, let's hold that thought. We'll be right back. And we are back with Perino on Politics. Josh, I have 3 things to ask you here. One is about Harris's decision about selecting a vice presidential running mate. And we've talked about these swing states. I don't understand why John King is getting some criticism today for saying that Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, while a very popular governor and someone that seems like a moderate guy that you could kind of work with, but John King said it might be a difficult choice for Kamala Harris because he is Jewish. And of course, we have a situation right now where the Democratic left on the progressives are very much, I don't want to say pro-Hamas, but at least it feels like, can I say pro-Hamas, or is that too much? Well,
they're anti-Israel and they're pockets of pro-Hamas sentiment that they indulge, that they
okay,
tolerate.
I don't feel like I'm going out too far out on a limb there. So tell me about the possibility. It's also interesting that everybody that they're naming for a possible running mate for her is a white male.
Well,
I guess DEI doesn't apply to her. If she's already DEI, I don't know.
Well, this is the old school. I think old school politics are where DEI is out and old school political complementing is back in. And I think you will see a moderate white male governor be the running mate for Kamala Harris.
Might be a good choice.
Yeah, and look, they have a lot of good options to choose from. I think it's sort of insane that one of the most popular governors in America, and Josh Shapiro, who wins over Republicans, who wins over independents in one of the most important states on the map, would have problems because the far left of the Democratic Party has become anti-Israel and, yes, in some cases anti-Semitic. That is the reality in 2024. It wasn't the case in 2000 when Al Gore picked Joe Lieberman. It was a net positive, and the base wasn't upset. But you're already hearing like anti-Israel groups sort of rumble and try to organize against Josh Shapiro. So that's the sad reality of where the Democratic Party is these days, and it'll be very interesting to see how much they need to pander to that faction, the left-wing anti-Israel faction in their party. I still think Shapiro is going to be closely considered. I think Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, is someone who would be a really smart pick. Has been winning elections in a red state. North Carolina could be on the map. The one thing I've heard from some Democratic sources is that there's concern that if Roy Cooper is tapped to the national ticket, his lieutenant governor, Mark Robinson, who's running for governor, would actually be in control of the state. It would actually be running the state, and he's very right wing, and they don't get along at all. So there might be some local considerations that Cooper might.
What about Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona?
So, look, Mark Kelly is a great political talent. He's the husband of Gabby Giffords. He's one of the more moderate Democratic senators, a party guy, though, to the core. Look, the only reason I think Kelly may be a tough pick for Harris is he would eventually open up that Arizona Senate seat at a time when the Senate's going to be very closely divided, I would expect. And if Kamala Harris is president and you have an open seat in Arizona, I would expect, odds would probably favor the Republicans to win that seat in an election. So you would have an appointment. There is a Democratic governor, so it would be a Democratic appointment. But once you have a special election, that seat could flip back to the Republicans. And we're looking at the possibility of if Kamala Harris is elected president, you're probably going to have a very closely divided Senate. Probably Republicans would have the slight majority under that scenario. So any seat matters, and giving up that seat in Arizona would be a tough choice.
When do you think she would make this decision? Because their convention starts a month from today, which is July 19th. So August 19th it starts.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's going to have time to. I mean, she's not even the nominee yet. She still has to figure out, how to get everyone on board. So that process has moved pretty fast so far. But I think it would come closer to the convention. I mean, Donald Trump picked J.D. Vance the first day of the Republican convention, generated maximum suspense. I think it would be a good political decision for Democrats to draw this out. There are moderates in the party. There are people who have effective governing records that don't get as much attention, and we just talked about a couple of them. It would be good to have a conversation about I think for the Democratic Party to have a conversation about people who aren't AOC, who aren't the most extreme left-wing members of the Democratic Party.
How does a Kamala Harris nomination, or even this change with Biden not on the ticket and it's some other Democrat, not Kamala Harris, how does that affect the down ballot races, in particular in the Senate in those swing states? Because you did have, for example, Senator Tester, Senator Brown, Senator Casey, I believe. Did he come out against Biden?
I don't know if Casey.
He might not have done that, but certainly Brown and Tester did because they saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, well, look, it's complicated for the purple state and purple district Democrats. Look, if Biden stayed on the ticket, I think there would have been sort of this unique situation where he would have lost, but you would have seen Democrats running well ahead of him, unlike we've seen in some time, because Biden's weakness was so unique to him about his age and his ability to serve. So I don't know, I know there was a lot of polling out there that Democrats were panicking about, but most of the polling showed Biden in really bad shape, but Democrats running for Congress still doing okay. I think the question is, how does Harris campaign? Does she campaign as sort of a born again moderate? Does she kind of embrace the Biden big tent coalition and try to move to the middle, pick a running mate that's a centrist that has less ties to the progressive left? Or does she kind of do what she's done throughout her career, which is always sort of pivot to the left? She always has seemed to be a notch to the left of Joe Biden. Was it the Romney campaign back in 2012 that talked about an Etch-a-Sketch moment? This is an Etch-a-Sketch moment for Kamala Harris. Look, she has this opportunity to reset her career, to reset her political brand. And she could be someone who moves a little to the middle as she prepares for a really tough. It's so
crazy
campaign.
Because the media has really not been kind to her in some ways, right? You have on the record former staffers of Kamala Harris saying she's terrible to work for. But the media all of a sudden has this strange new respect for Kamala Harris, which we will see. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we are back with Perino on Politics. Josh, I want to switch gears for a moment and talk about the fact that we are just a couple of days since an incredible Republican convention. We haven't had a chance to talk about the Trump-Vance ticket since last Monday when we last recorded. So your thoughts on how they left with the wind at their back?
Yeah, it's a unified Republican Party, but it's a different Republican Party than I remember. I'm sure you remember.
I think it was Jake Tapper said we're a long way from Kenny Bunkport, which sort of broke my heart in a way, because I look at some of the economics and the foreign policy. I'm like, I don't think I'm on board with that. But I could respect the unified feeling, and it was a feeling, and campaigns can and need emotion. Can have emotion, and they need emotion in order to propel them forward. And I said that George H.W. Bush said in a campaign, you need the big mo, and that Biden was in the big slow. And now that's off the table. So Trump, Vance, at this point, would you say they have the advantage in the election?
I would. I think it's a narrow advantage, and it's always been a narrow advantage. But now that Democrats have their nominee, this is going to be a real campaign. It's going to be a close race. Look, and I think the pick of Vance double down, Dana, on this new Republican Party, on like a working class Republican Party that has very different views on economics and foreign policy than the Republican Party I certainly grew up with. Look, I think there's a lot of political opportunity with this rebranding, and it was a unified part. I met with some, Senate candidates while I was out in Milwaukee, and some lawmakers, and it's striking that even the people who are, I would probably characterize as part of the old party, have really made their peace with the new party, and are sounding the same notes as Trump and sounding the same rhetoric as JD Vance. So I was stunned by the unity, even though the party's message was a whole lot different than I'm used to. You don't see Hulk Hogan. Yeah, I don't think Hulk Hogan or anyone in the kind of that space was really at the Bush
in the lead up to the president's speech, former President Trump's speech. I was having so much fun. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening. Like, the Hulk Hogan thing was so energetic, and then Dana White, of course, but Kid Rock. I was like, this is incredible. What a show! What a party they put on.
It was fun. It was a fun Republican Party. And I hadn't seen the party. I mean, I've been covering conventions since 2004. That's about as united as I've seen since that first New York convention I covered for the Republicans back then with George W. Bush in his reelection. So, I mean, it was a show. I think they really positioned themselves very nicely for the general election. The only thing I would say is that Donald Trump could have cut his speech. If he stuck to the script.
It was way too long.
It probably would have gone a little bit better.
My last thing on the Republicans for you is that right now you have many of them suggesting that many Republicans, there's like a whole movement, and I get why they're saying this. It's that, Biden, if you are withdrawing from the race, you never said why. And we don't actually get to see the president. There's not even a still photo that's released. There's no video. There's no explanation as to why. And if the issue is health and age, their question is, why don't you resign now from the presidency if you can't actually do the job? But I also sort of feel like Kamala Harris looks like she's on the fast track to becoming the nominee. I don't know. Does Biden have what it takes? Should the Republicans be pushing on this? Maybe they should. What do you think?
They will be. I think we move so fast. Our attention spans move so fast these days. I think the story about Biden's going to be the old news. No one's going to talk about Joe Biden in a week. It's all going to be about Kamala Harris. And yes, Republicans are going to raise the question of whether Biden can finish out his term and try to, put more pressure on Harris to answer what she knew about Biden's health and when she knew about it. But I do think there's just so much going on heading to Chicago in August for the Democratic convention. I just think that may get lost in the shuffle. That there are a lot of other better hits Republicans may have about the Biden policies, about Harris's progressive past.
I actually want to know, are they going to drop the impeachment hearings against Biden?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I wouldn't be. That's not right. That's not in there. Biden's going to be yesterday's news. Once
kind of
give him a nice
is.
send off. Well, there's going to be a nice send off at the convention. There'll be a nice, toast to Joe Biden. He'll give a speech, and that's it, right? I mean, I don't think that closes the book on Biden's soon to be finished presidency. Look, I also think that the question of Biden, there are questions about like why Biden didn't put out a photo or a video. It makes me kind of look back and think about 2020, Dana, and Biden was always more of a symbol than the reality of who Biden is was never really tested. It was more the symbol of someone who could beat Trump and who could put together all these different factions within the Democratic Party coalition. I mean, look, think about it. Joe Biden got the support from anti-Trump Republicans to like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and all those left wingers, and they were able to live together under the Joe Biden umbrella because he was inoffensive. He was just sort of your traditional establishment party line Democrat. With Kamala Harris, that's no longer going to be now. They're going to try to keep that tent together, but it's a lot harder to kind of unify the party. And Harris is a lot more polarizing. And part of Biden's ability in 2020 was he was boring. He could, Harris is not going to be boring.
It was supposed to be. They were supposed to be the return to normal, no chaos party.
Right.
And now it feels like Trump is the no chaos party. It's so weird. Josh, my last question to you is, we're in uncharted water, so maybe this question is a difficult one for this week, which is, I like to ask, what could I be missing? What will you be paying attention to in the next week or so in this election, which was kind of sleepy before the last month, and now it's like you don't even want to take a nap because you're afraid you're going to miss something?
Well, I don't think this is under the radar, but the Veep stakes very much going to be played now that all the leading Democrats have endorsed Kamala Harris as leading, at least contenders for the Veep stakes have gotten behind her. I think they're all going to be trying to suck up and contend for the number 2 spot on the national ticket. So there's going to be a lot of drama on that front. And I also think, look, I think we'll see how long this unity within the Democratic Party lasts, because this is among the most the most divided any party has been for like 3 whole weeks as Biden stuck around that I've seen in recent memory.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, she came out for Harris, but has Bernie Sanders said anything?
Yeah, I don't think Sanders has endorsed Harris.
Right.
And look, the progressives are going to be an interesting storyline. The AOC did endorse Kamala Harris later, even though she initially had done an Instagram video saying that she was sticking with Biden before he dropped out of the race. Look, I think the progressives were hoping that Joe Biden would be the nominee and lose, and then they could say that the moderates and the old guard had basically lost and they could take over. I think Harris complicates their path a little bit in that if she loses, you can't, she's I assume she's going to be running with the excitement of the base and more energy, and you can't just say it's the moderate side. You're not going to be able to blame the center of the party for losing.
Well, and I'll just end on this note that it was only 10 days ago that an assassin tried to kill former President Trump, and thank God he did not succeed. And there's hearings happening right now to try to figure out what happened. The Secret Service director is not giving many answers at all. In fact, I kind of joked that it looked like she'd been briefed by the same people that briefed the university presidents when they went up there and couldn't even say that the anti-Semitic actions against Jewish students were a hate crime. She couldn't answer any question, and I think that's unacceptable. And I never, ever would have gone into a hearing and said, I don't know, to some basic questions. But that's what she's doing. We'll see if she gets away with that. One last thought on that?
Yeah, it's a bipartisan moment. I mean, it's a rare time when you have Republicans and Democrats agreeing that the Secret Service director is got to go. And I was watching both Republicans and Democrats grilling Cheadle, and basically, even though they had different complaints, thinking that she could not last in her job. I don't know how much longer she survives.
Indeed. Well, hey, it's only Monday. Who knows what this week will bring? Josh Kraushaar, you're the best. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dana.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.